Well, I didn't want to make this video until I actually saw the webinar that was advertised for the integration between Unreal Engine, Sketchup, and Datasmith. However, after an hour of waiting, I think they have a technical glitch, and 200 people plus myself didn't get to see anything. So I jumped into working with it, and this video is by no means a comprehensive sort of overview of what the integration is all about, but just my viewpoints on certain things that I've checked up with the system as I've been using it, and it's really exciting. I did a few videos on showing how to move from SketchUp into Unreal with your models, etc., and things you should take care of. This plugin now takes it to a totally different level. I was a bit anxious that it was just going to do a simple transfer of the model across, like most packages do. They just kind of get it in there, and then you have a bit of a broken model and have to work at it. But the first release that they've had of Datasmith does such an incredible job. It helps with UVs, with the materials, bringing it across. I think it is just quite phenomenal. So you need to have Unreal Engine Studio running. You can download it. I think it's in beta version now, but it's free. And the version needs to be version 4.20, okay, 4.20. And also, at the moment, I'm running on preview 3. And I think it will go preview 4 and keep going up as they're busy stabilizing the actual release. So how do you get hold of it? At the moment, you can go to this site, unrealengine.com/en-us/studio/downloads, and you can scroll down to the page and you'll find these exporters here. Okay, there's ones for 3D Max, and this is our happy moment. Here we've got SketchUp getting its own exporter, Datasmith exporter. For those people who are a bit sort of skeptical about using SketchUp because, you know, they've been using all these high polygon softwares all the while, this is an indication how serious SketchUp is, and I'm excited to see that Datasmith has started using the SketchUp export as one of the very early ones that are implementing. It works really nicely. Okay, I've been working with it for a while now, and I've not had any problems that I could note. It's a major step up of me exporting from SketchUp in FBX format or in OBJ format and working through that. This is a seamless system. It really works nice, but we'll get into that now. So if you download, it will give you an MSI file, which is a Windows file. For those people who are using Apple's, unfortunately, there is no Apple version of the plugin for SketchUp at this point in time. They probably might develop it in future, but if you want to have a workaround with it and you've got a Mac, you've got to do what I basically did way back in the day. I worked with an agency and they gave me a Mac. So I put Boot Camp on it, which is a integrated sort of thin system that goes onto the computer, and I was able then to put Windows onto that and install my Windows programs. So that's about the only way that you can have that workaround. So for people who are running SketchUp on a Mac, this plugin won't be able to be installed there. I'm not sure if it will work with the emulator, the Wine emulator. I haven't tested that at all. Okay, so you download this, the MSI file, you just run it like a normal program, and it asked me if I wanted to include it into my SketchUp 2017 and 18 because I have both installed. Said yes, and it installed seamlessly, perfectly. I'm not sure if it's compatible, you know, earlier than that. You'll have to check that out if you have an earlier version and just let us know about that. So then it was a click install, and it basically just puts one export feature into your normal export. When you go File, Export, 3D, you have OBJ and that sort of stuff in there. It just gives you an extra one, which is referenced as Datasmith. So that's the extension there. And you basically export a normal SketchUp file into that format, and that goes as a as a true format that Unreal Engine fully understands, because it's written for that purpose. Okay, so I'm going to just go across to SketchUp. This is a client wanted me to do a photo booth sample. I'm not intending to render anything into photo quality. It is just for purposes of idea and concept. So they gave me some areas to skin the model with. Just important to note that, oh wait, before I go there, let me just show you. If I go to File, Export, 3D Model, and I've done a few exports already, but here it is, Datasmith, with all the other export features. And that's all, and you export. There's no other settings that you have to have, like whether you're going to include this, that, or the other. It's just one click. Okay, things that I want you just to be aware of. And if you watch some of the other videos that I've done before Datasmith came on the scene, I mentioned a few things about textures and creating groups together to make it simple. Those things all still apply. I would just remind you that it is essential, if you don't want to have a situation that you move a model across and you can't move the individual components, then you save each piece that you want to keep separate as a group or a component. So if I look at this here, this wall particularly, you know, if anybody's watched my other videos, this is how I kind of move things out of the way. I keep it on an axis and maybe type in a number like 5, so I know how far it's moved. But if you want this particular object here to be separate from, say this is a screen, this is a TV screen that's against this wall that I just moved out of the way, then you make it as 2 separate objects. Don't make the TV screen and this wall as one object, because then you're not going to be able to, if you decide to move the TV screen, it's going to be difficult. And remember that textures that are put onto surfaces or textures that are put onto entire objects will translate into Unreal Engine as per normal. So maybe just a reminder, if you look at this box here, if you put a texture on a side of the box and then you select it all and create one group. If you turn this into a group, you say make a group, but the one side has one texture, the other one another texture, and so forth. When you take this into Unreal Engine, even through the Datasmith exporter, it will read this as one mesh, but when you look at the actual object itself, it will show the different textures that are there. Then you can change the textures and they will change on the model. But if you take the whole model and you drop one texture onto it, you can't edit the individual side textures at all, because Unreal is not really focusing on editing meshes, as in sizing meshes and so forth. It's merely there to add the textures, add the properties and everything. So the modeling has to happen outside of the environment. There is modeling that you can do in Unreal, but don't even worry about going that way. Rather do your models in SketchUp and take them out there fully textured and everything. Okay, so just remember, a particular object can have different surfaces with different textures on, or if you throw one texture on the whole thing, then you're locked into that. You can't then manipulate each different surface, change colors of the different surfaces. Okay, hopefully that is clear. I might have confused you with that. But then again, just watch some of the other videos. It will clear that up. I speak quite a bit about SketchUp and Unreal conversion. But today we are mainly looking at the Datasmith part of this whole deal, which I'm excited about. Again, if I want to move this wall right back, I'll take it, press M for move, and I'll start on that same axis and let go anywhere. And you know I moved it 5. I just type 5. You see 5 at the bottom and press enter. Oops, I think I messed it up by clicking somewhere else. So you'll go there, press 5 and enter, and it shifts back exactly into space. Okay, so don't, if you take a wall or something or an object and move it aside, don't just move it and drop it there. Move it on an axis, choose a number so you know when you move it back, it will move exactly to where it is. So for those people who work with, you know, naming stuff and, for example, with entity info, if you're going to select this front wall and you've got to give it a name, that all will translate through this exporter, this Datasmith exporter. if you create groups or components and you work on layers, everything is migrated beautifully and kept in that structure right across. The other thing that the exporter does brilliantly is take all the materials across and it formulates it into a Unreal Engine workable material. I'll show you that. That is quite the most exciting part of this thing also. The next thing is we've discussed things like UV maps where, you take it from here, you take it into Unreal before, and then you start to run a render, and then you see it, all the UV maps shift out of place. You could bring it into Unreal in the past, and it would then create its own UV map. So you'd have the map that comes in and a second UV map. This tool now, when you export it and bring it into Unreal, it creates 2 extra UV maps. So the original UV map of the texture that's on the model, it takes across and it generates 2 others that actually works towards cleaning up the UV, so there's no overlaps and problems like that. It is quite awesome. Okay, so just remember, if like here now, this layer, these layers over here, if it goes across, it's going to read it like that inside Unreal, because the exporter is designed to read all the different features that are in SketchUp and take it across and interpret it on that side. If you have an object and you've hidden it, those things will also be taken over. So just make sure you clean up your models. There's extensions that you can use, like a clean extension where it can clean up all unwanted things on your model. So normal general practice of getting clean models is still quite essential. So, you do that. But pretty much this model, all I did was created walls, put them, made sure they fit against each other, put textures on sides. Like in this case here, I put a texture on this side. On the edges, I put different textures, and on the inside, a different one, because I knew it will reflect. So if I get into Unreal, I can change the inside of the room here, and it wouldn't affect the whole wall on this side here. Okay, so you still got to kind of do those things. Okay, so here we have the model. Now we're going to take it out, and I'm going to go File, Export 3D Model. I'm going to just find a place that I can go and put this, or maybe I'll go put it there where I have this particular client's things. We'll go into Kiosk. Okay, now I've already sat and fiddled with a couple of stuff. I'm going to just delete these folders, and let me call this one Kiosk LP. What it does is it creates this file, Kiosk LP, and it creates a folder with all the textures and reference files. I used to have an issue in the past when people used to have their own format that's exclusively for them, and I used to always believe that you need to have a format that can be used across platforms like an FBX or OBJ. But in this case, I'm very excited that they have their own unique one, because it just means that when you're taking data from a third-party CAD program like SketchUp and moving it across, there's no guesswork in between. The program is written to understand SketchUp, and it's written to understand Unreal, and it migrates those things very tightly. And I'm happy to see that they've created their own extension, which is called Datasmith. Okay, so let's click Export. You'll see there's no other buttons because it fully understands what it needs to take out. It's saying it's there already, but I just deleted out the folder. I'll just say yes, and it will rewrite it. And that's all. Now you've exported the entire SketchUp model. And remember, you're not exporting the physical SketchUp model or sending it out as an OBJ or FBX. It is actually the plugin, the exporter, that's taking the SketchUp model, remodifying all the parameters, and placing it in a way that now when you open it up in Unreal, it fully understands that that group is a group, that layer is a layer, and so forth. They fully integrated and understand each other, which is very exciting. So now we are done with SketchUp. That's about it there, and you open up Unreal. So yeah, I'm going to just right click and create a folder. Let's call that Kiosk LP. Okay, and I'm not going to double click in there. Usually you go double click in there and you start to do an import. That's the usual way, and you bring in FBXs and OBJs. But in this case, I'm creating the folder because it's my reference. I'm going to put it in there, but look what happens here. You go to import Datasmith. Just important to note that there are plugins that have to be enabled for Datasmith all to work. And if you haven't enabled them, you've got to go to Edit, go to Plugins. And if you type here Datasmith, you'll see all of these are enabled here, these importers. So you just make sure that all of them are running. When you do install the Unreal Studio version, it will require you to activate these things also. Okay, so you land up with this, and if you click the dialog down here, it's able to give you different formats here. And this is if you're bringing in an FBX from VRED file, etc. It gives that ability, because these are from other CAD programs. But in our case, we've got a program totally integrated in the Datasmith format from SketchUp right into Unreal. So we'll choose that option because the file we're bringing in is a Datasmith file. Click that, and let's go to that folder I was working in. There we go, and there's the file. That's all. Can you see that folder contains all the assets? And that's not only things such as textures and materials. It's got a whole lot of other files in there that gives the full integration. It reads layouts of structures. It looks at a lot of other stuff, and that's what makes it so brilliant. It's customized for this purpose. Okay, so we'll say open, and here's what's lovely. It asks us into which folder. Now, interesting is if you bring in an FBX or an OBJ from another third party, that OBJ might have been exported with the different parameters that have to be in an OBJ, but because that is a different software, they might have their own little permutation of how they create their OBJs. So what Unreal has to do when it imports an OBJ, it has to ask a whole lot of questions, and you have to check boxes to make sure you're including or excluding certain features, etc. Whereas with the actual Datasmith file, it's been created from SketchUp's side, and it knows exactly what's in there. So when you import it now into Unreal, Unreal doesn't ask you 1,000,001 questions. It knows what the Datasmith file has, and it just asks you the essential things for what you want about that model to be included. So if I click OK here, I'm saying let it go into that kiosk LP folder. And this is the simple things. I've already disabled these last two. You can bring in lights and cameras are basically the scenes in SketchUp. So if you have different scenes, it brings it in as cameras, and it uses the actual camera of Unreal Engine when it opens up here. But I'm not going to bring that in, and lights also. And this little checkbox down here is for when you bring your static meshes in, the resolution of the light maps that you are going to generate. That's if you're going to generate light maps. And if you don't understand light maps and all that, you can do a little bit research. I'm not going to be able to cover all of that. It's quite in depth. But what I'm saying is geometry comes in, materials and textures come in, and that's all I want with these. The nice thing here is also, unlike the OBJs and FBXs and other imports that we usually used to bring into the program, it would come in a folder. We'd have to select all the components, drag it onto the view, the editor here. We have to drag it onto the surface. It then comes out in the world outliner here as like say 20 or 30 files. We've got to then put them in a folder and all of that PT. This gets done all automatically. Also, if there are layers, it all gets placed in layers and kept in that structure, which is quite brilliant. Just watch what happens. One click. And there you see it's busy pulling in all the images, all the textures, all the other reference files are being integrated right through there now. So the point I make is Datasmith file is generated from SketchUp in all the formats that is required, built in there, customized. And when Unreal reads it, it knows exactly what's in that file and how to interpret it. So there is a seamless integration. Okay, it's not second guessing an FBX or an OBJ file that might have different permutations to it. Okay, so now we have it. I'm going to just go through this just to show you. If you look here at the world outliner, we have kiosk there, and under kiosk, this is just busy loading. When that's done, under kiosk, we have all these groups here, and they're all in subgroups, and everything is kept in order. Now you'll see the thing says group, 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 and that's because I didn't go into the files in SketchUp and name them correctly. These are just default names. So I suggest if you want to have your naming nomenclature sorted out, then do that all in SketchUp. So when you bring it through here, all those names will translate through here. Okay, so here's the other thing that I think is quite well thought through. I've got this entire mesh over here with all of these parts that are operational here, but you see I brought it and it's actually gone through this ground that I'm using. Now I could have brought my own ground in, but for this purpose I want to show you here it's through the ground at its 0 point. So if I have the model there and I want to actually move it onto the surface, I could grab this model, but if I move, I'm only going to move one segment. I press Ctrl Z to get it back. I want to select the whole lot. And what used to happen before, I would have had to go start right at the bottom, move right up and select all of them, and then move it up as such. In this case, all I do is I go to the root area, right click on it, and I go to select. And one of the additional options here is select all Datasmith scene. I select that, it automatically will select that. Look here, it doesn't put bounding boxes around everything and get very messy with all the selection. It just gives me one handle, and then I move it up and that's it. Then I've got the whole thing. Now the point is for me to position it here. You know, you could go and look from side views and everything and see that it's on the surface. Or there's an easier way. Once you've got this selected, on your keyboard you press the key end that says end. If I do that, it snaps to the immediate object below it. So if I had another object below it, it would snap onto that object. Okay, so that feature's been there around for a while, but I just thought I'd share that with you. So what we have here pretty much is a beautiful model that's been imported cleanly. So what did Datasmith do for us? Okay, there's quite a few things, and like I said, I probably am just scraping the top surface. So what I'm going to just do here, I'm going to just clean up this side here. Let me see if I can. Okay. I just want to take this object away. Okay. What I do is, just for those of you who haven't watched any of the other videos of mine, I work with movable lights, which means my light acts as a real light in real time. So I don't have to keep baking the light into the textures. And how do I do that? I usually, when I start off, I select my skylight, I click on movable light. It's usually on stationary. So stationary will have the ability of movable and static lights working for it. If you're not familiar with this, you can do a bit of research, but I use mine onto movable lights, and then my other light source, or whichever light I put in, I always make sure it's on movable. You'll notice if I just go and drop a light in here, I'm going to just take a normal light and drop it in here. As soon as I drop it, it says light needs to be rebuilt, because it needs to know how the shadows and everything are falling, because by default it comes out as a stationary light. If I make it a static light, it will say exactly the same thing, because it needs to actually run through and render and have its effect and lighting on different areas. And in some cases, if you're going to bake it into the textures, it will do that. But it's not a real feedback of the system. Whereas if you select it as movable light, you watch here what will happen. That will go away. And if I move the light, you'll see the shadows will move in real time. Okay, because computers are getting more powerful, you're able to do this in real time. And I prefer working with things like this in real time. It just gives better feedback, and then I don't constantly have to bake it in. If you're developing games, then baking your light in is essential, because you want to have a low overhead when you're busy playing the games. I don't develop games. I just use my things for visualization and creating walkthroughs and videos, and having my movable lights function is perfect for me. And then you don't sit with unnecessary problems with lighting and and textures and light maps that are sort of broken in the system. Anyhow, enough said about that. I'm going to just remove that light. Okay, so we have that feature to move the entire object. My lighting I set as it is over there. Okay, here's where the exciting thing comes along. Before I go to the actual materials, I'm going to just go to one of these objects, and it selects it here, and I'm going to right click and say edit this group. I just want to show you the UV meshes. So this is the usual object editor. I think that's called that. And this is, I've got it set to give me real-time feedback here. Now here is where you can put all the bounding boxes when you create collision boxes for games, etc. But if we look here on the side now, very interestingly, we see here that it says vertices 24, but UV channels 3. Now, like I said in the previous versions, when we brought in a model from SketchUp or an OBJ or FBX, on the import panel, it would say, do you want to generate a UV? It would ask you that. It didn't take it for granted. Here, because we're coming from SketchUp, the Datasmith system knows that you want to sort out the UVs. It wants to do it for you. So it doesn't even ask you. It automatically does it with every SketchUp model that comes in. So that is a major thing. So UV maps, it will have 3. And it starts off at 0, then 1 and 2. That equals the 3 UV maps. The 0 will be what comes in with SketchUp. The 1 and 2 is how the Datasmith integration and the Unreal Engine import will clean up and do the best to align that UV mesh so that they don't overlap and cause problems later. And that is brilliant. Okay, so noticing the UV mesh 3 is quite significant. For those people who used to have UV meshes that used to give so much problems from SketchUp or so forth, this is now quite a bit the solution. So if you bring in OBJ from another program, it's probably better to use the Datasmith OBJ importer that's custom for that software so that it also doesn't have the conflicts, that it fully understands that third-party software. But I'll click here on the UV, and if you look here, channel 0, you'll see what it looks like. Okay, so we've got it here as this particular area, but you're noticing something here. There's, I'm not sure if I'm reading it correctly, but these red lines are indicating that there might be some conflicts. But if we go to UV channel 2, there's it busy. It's placed out the UV maps on there, and then the third channel, which is reference UV channel 2, there's it pulls it out over there. So I'm not too sure. I'll have to research this, but I think UV0 is one sort of layout of it. But the second one looks like it is actually the UV of this object from SketchUp. And the third one shows them being cleaned up very nicely. Here, they all positioned very nicely. If you don't understand UV maps, it will help you just to do a bit of, superficial research about it. But technically, each of these blocks represent a surface, and the idea is you don't want any of these surfaces to be crossing each other, because where they cross, the light won't reflect properly onto those surfaces, or they won't function correctly when you're looking at light maps and all that sort of stuff. So each of these surfaces are nicely separated from each other, and that's done fully automatic. I love that. Okay, let's close that off. The next thing I just want to show you here is the actual materials. Now, before we go into the materials, it's important to say that previously when you brought in the model from SketchUp using OBJ and FBX, it would bring the materials across. So it basically created a material. And let me just show you what the material would look like. I'm going to create one now, but this is just basically to show you what a material would look like if you had imported it from SketchUp. Actually, let me just remove that and try and mimic an exact one. I'm going to import just a picture. Yeah, let me just import this picture. Okay, so I'm going to import this picture, and I'm going to create a material out of it. So what would happen is, if you had to import it in just as an OBJ and so forth, it would bring in all the actual textures and materials, and they would look like this. I'm going to right click here and say create a material. Just wait for this to, it's just taking this texture, this picture, and putting it into a material for me. So it's busy compiling that at the moment. It's not applied to any of this object. It's just a material I'm creating. So it's going to possibly take a little while to do that. But what I want to show you, and I'm going to try and click on here and see it. This would be exactly how materials are created when you bring in a normal SketchUp model, not using the Datasmith system. And this is what it will look like. Let me just click on here. Okay, so you'll have a thing like this. This is the nodes. If you're not familiar with this, do a bit of research. I've got a video or two will show you simple ways of actually creating materials. But the old way, if I can call it the old way, or the non-Datasmith way, is all the materials that come in will look something like this. Then you've got to go in and you've got to start dropping nodes. You've got to drop not a texture sample. You've got to do, I think it's that one. Yeah, a texture coordinates, and you've got to put it into the UVs and create all your nodes to create sizes, etc. So you've got to do quite a bit of editing. So it comes in here, and if you want to add onto that some roughness, you'll go in and, for example, I'm going to keep S down and click left mouse, and we'll create a parameter there, and I'll put it on roughness, name that, say roughness or whatever, and then from that I do the settings that are necessary for this to have the parameters, etc. So I don't even know where I'm putting this. Anyhow, you set up all your materials, so now you're going to set up all your nodes and everything for every single material that you brought in. Okay, so this would be the norm that everybody's familiar with. You open the material that's brought in from SketchUp and you start to actually create the material. So if there's 50 materials, you've got to go in, open each one, modify them, add features that you want to, whether it's creating roughness, smooth, or different parameters. Okay, sorry, I had the wrong tag here. So you'd go in there and you'd say, okay, what's the default value, starting of your slide, and so forth. And then once you create this, when you have the material, it will then create parameters that you can edit on the fly, and then you can create instances of those materials. Once again, if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, go look at some of the other videos. It explains it quite nice there. The point I'm making is, for everybody that's been bringing in their materials from SketchUp like this before, you had to go through this entire tedious process. Now I'm going to close this and not save it. I'm going to delete these two because I don't need it. That's just was used for an example. Let me show you what happens automatically when we brought this in here now. Okay, we brought the model in. It looks really clean and nice. And I'm going to press the G key to remove all these handles and everything. Okay, so it just cleans up the screen. If I want it back, I press G again, it will come back. Okay, so if I now go and look at these materials, so I go and select this surface. If I go down on the side here, I will see there's the materials that are associated with that surface. Now you'll notice there might be this kind of purple color and a white color, and then this textures we're seeing, and a yellow. So there's like 4 of these, and I don't see much of these colors here. It's because we've given that the color in SketchUp, and then we've put a texture over it. So that color still exists over there. But don't worry too much about it. It's not that you're over loading your actual model itself. It just comes in. If you want to clear it up, you clear it up in SketchUp, and then it won't project through here. Datasmith, all it's doing is bringing in everything that belongs into this actual panel. So what I want to do is find this particular texture. I'm going to click the browse button. It goes into the folders and finds this for me. Okay. Now here's the interesting thing. With the other material that I just created, you notice when I double clicked on it here, it opened it up in the editor, in the material editor. However, all these materials that have been brought in through Datasmith for the SketchUp model will open up in an interface that looks more like an instance window. If you're not familiar with instances and materials, just check that up first, and then you can carry on watching this. But let me show you. If I double click here now, I've clicked this side here, check the material. If I double click, look what happens. For those of you who will recognize, this looks like an instance window, which it is. It actually is the instance window. So it doesn't take you to the material, it takes you to the instance window, because when Datasmith brings in the materials from Sketchup, it takes that material, it converts it into a Unreal material. It then adds a set number of parameters, and these are the parameters here. You see this on the side from the fact that it knows that it's using a texture. It knows to put in a couple of nodes that add a texture scale. So if you want to size it, if you want to make it metallic, you want to add smoothness. So these features are added to this particular texture. So every single texture that comes in from SketchUp will have all these features added, and you can add more to them if you choose to do so, but these are the standard ones. Now here at the bottom you see emit. I was busy experimenting with it, so when you get yours it won't have emit here, because that is just to explain emission. You'll just have up until this area put in here. So what the program does is, the algorithm brings in the material, converts it to an Unreal material, creates all these parameters for every single material and makes them available. And the brilliance of this is that you don't have to now sit through, in this case, if I counted it, was like 100 and some odd materials that were all over text and textures. You don't have to go and modify any of those now. You have all of these features. If you want to customize them beyond this, then of course you go do that. But basically 90% of people who bring in SketchUp models will be able to work with these material settings here that Datasmith automatically creates. So if I have this here, look, if I want to add now a bit of, drop the roughness to maybe 0.25 and make it a nice shiny surface, there we got it. Take it down to 0.125. There we got nice shiny surface. If I wanted to, let's see if opacity will work. I don't know. Let's go. Yeah, let's go to 0.24. Okay, so this opacity, I've just got to go check how that works, because that doesn't seem to function there. But if I wanted to change this into metallic, okay, it's going to probably re-render itself now because it adds additional features. Let's just wait a second or two. But basically, these features are ones that you can use across, like I said, 90% of the materials you bring in. So that takes all that heavy lifting of sitting on every material and going to recreate it, takes that away and works it seamless in there. Just hope this thing loads here. Might take a little bit of a while. I think we'll be patient. Or maybe I'll just switch that off for now so that we don't have to delay matters. Okay, so yet again, if I wanted to edit the texture, I could go in and make this 2. You'll see the sizing of it changes, etc. Okay, but all of these parameters now, we don't have to go create for every material. It comes through and it's done as a starting point for us. Okay, I think that was what the metal looked like. I think my computer's taking a bit of strain in the screen recording and editing also. Okay, it seems to have defaulted to the metal there. Let me just clear it up. There we go. Let's get that back there. There we go. Okay, so this is what happens now. Question is, if you want to edit the actual original of this and not the instance, basically, that's been automatically created for you when you import it, what you will do is you'll go to the parent down, scroll down, go to the parent, and you'll recognize the actual familiar material editor. So this is where you would have come with normal imports that you didn't use through Datasmith. You'd come here if you clicked on the material, and this would have nothing in this area, and you would have had to start building this entire material up. So every material has this node system linked into it, and these are all just nodes are creating the parameters that we showed you in the previous window. Okay, so this is a major step forward in really getting every single material on par to work with. Now, if you wanted to create a, like here now, let me see if I delete that and save that. If you wanted to create a unique additional part, if you wanted to add ambient occlusion or any other features, then it still works like any normal material. All that Datasmith is doing is saying your materials no longer need to be customized for 90% of the work you do. We will do that for you, and we'll give you the parameters to start working with. If you're going to dig deeper, be our guest and go and do that. Okay, so this is brilliant. So if I close this window, let's just see if we close. Okay, I'll close this window. And if I go to any of the other materials, anyone, if I go to this one, exactly the same thing happens. Okay, all of them are actually created as instances. And if you hover over them, you'll see here, it says Stacy shoelace sole material instance. So what Datasmith does is brings in all the materials, creates instances of them, but within the panel itself, it gives you the ability to go and access the real editor. Whereas materials created another way, when they appear here, when you click them, they are the original material, not the instance. Okay, so I think hopefully that is clear with you. Datasmith for Sketchup brings in materials, and what you see in the browser are all instances. Okay, so you've got to think of it that way. And why is that brilliant? Because if you go now and you want to edit this area, you already have the material, everything. You come here, you go look for the material, you click in there and you say, okay, I want to change that. Now you want to go for the next one. Let's see. Let's go on this side. We select this material. Let's go to, where are they? There we go. Okay, then same thing here. I am going to go to, let me just make this a bit bigger. Take this out here. I'm going to add some roughness, 0.25, and you will see. And here you could save it, or I just close the window and it will automatically save it for me. Okay, and there you can see the kind of nice shine. To see it better, I'm going to just drop a light here, bring a light, and you can see the probably the light reflecting a bit better. But anyhow, let me take the light out. Okay, so if we're going to go and this floor, let's just do this floor as a last example. Okay, I'm sure this is the one we've got now. There we go. So I'm going to change it into a nice purple color, and I'm going to make the surface nice and shiny. Okay, so we can get a bit of shine inside there. You can see nice reflection there. I'm going to just push it to full screen and we can just have a look at it there. And that's basically the model, nice and clean. A nice and clean model. So hopefully this has been of value to you, and you know, if you go and you experiment and find more things with it, share it with the rest. And you know, always the more we share with each other, the less time each of us will spend researching things unnecessarily. So hopefully this has helped you save some time. And yeah, bless you, and have a fantastic day.